From advertising to software as a service to data.
Across all of our programs and clients, we've seen a 55 to 65% open rate.
Getting brands authentically integrated into content performs better than TV advertising.
Typical lifespan of an article is about 24 to 36 hours.
If we're reaching out to the right person with the right message and a clear call to action, then it's just a matter of timing.
Welcome to the MarTech podcast, and I Hear Everything production. In this podcast, you'll hear the stories of world-class marketers that use technology to drive business results and achieve career success. We'll unearth the real-world experiences of some of the brightest minds in the marketing and technology space so you can learn the tools, tips, and tricks they've learned along the way. Now here's the host of the MarTech podcast, Benjamin Shapiro.
Welcome to the MarTech podcast. I'm your host, Benjamin Shapiro, and today we're going to discuss some alternative tracking methods that can help you monetize your audience. Joining us is Shiv Gupta, who is the founder and CEO of The U of Digital, which educates the digital marketing and advertising industry through a variety of different touch points, including live workshops, e-learnings, webinars, newsletters, and more. The U of Digital has educated over 15,000 industry professionals and counting, and tapped into the expertise of 150 industry vets for their deep knowledge in the space. And today, Shiv and I are going to discuss the convergence of adTech and MarTech. All right, here's the first part of my conversation with Shiv Gupta, the founder and CEO of U of Digital. Shiv, welcome to the MarTech podcast.
Thanks, Ben. Excited to be here.
Excited to have you here. You know, I saw your application in our queue, and the first thing when I saw U of Digital was the University of Miami must be upset because they're known as the U, and so are you. Why don't you tell everybody, what are you guys doing? What's the U of Digital about?
Well, first of all, funny story, Ben. We were about to launch like an e-learning product a couple of years ago, and we had an idea. Let's brand it the U. And that, we like very quickly realized that was probably a bad idea. So we are the U of Digital. We want to stay away from just being known as the U for obvious reasons. But yeah, a little bit about us and how we got started and what we do. I'm an adTech guy, so it's weird that I'm on the MarTech podcast here with you. My background was adTech, DSP land. I was at AOL, that little company called AOL for about 10 years in operations and sales leadership. I was at another adTech company called Criteo for a couple of years. And 5 years ago, after leaving Criteo, I realized a couple things. One is I realized I love teaching. I love educating. I think it's really valuable. It's rewarding. But more importantly, what I realized was, and this was the impetus for starting the company, was that salespeople in particular, the salespeople in the year 2018, when I started the company, that were selling the biggest deals, that were generating the most trust from their partners, that were creating kind of the most enterprise stickiness, were the ones that could talk industry at a really high level, that could be thought leaders, that could be masters of the domain, right? And what I realized is like most salespeople aren't that. They can't do that effectively for a variety of reasons, right? There's limitations on time, there's limitations on bandwidth. A lot of people don't necessarily have the intellectual curiosity to go out and self-teach. And even if they do, there's not a lot of great resources to learn the industry at large. So I kind of backed myself into like, what does this mean and how can we solve this problem? And as I dissected like the learning and development at a lot of companies in these tech spaces, specifically adTech and MarTech, I realized that they typically only train on two things. Thing number one, their own products. So, hey, everybody, we're going to fire hose you to death with all of our product marketing stuff. Here's how it works. Here's the differentiators, blah, 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 blah. And number two, soft skills, right? Here's how you sell better. Here's how you read the room. Here's how you negotiate. But the third leg of the stool that I think is critical for effective selling in the modern technology age is domain expertise, right? And no one's training these folks on the domain, right? So that's how U of Digital was born initially.
So Shiv, you mentioned that domain expertise is something that's hard to train. And look, you're an adTech guy. I'm a MarTech guy. But honestly, today, what the heck is the difference? Talk to me a little bit about while you're training people to be experts in digital, what's happening in blending I guess there's a big convergence of MarTech and adTech. Tell me a little bit about the combining of our two spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. And we like to lovingly in our industry sometimes now call them adTech. MarTech and adTech's called MadTech. So what's happening at a high level is, at the end of the day, marketing is the big umbrella term. Advertising is actually a subset of marketing. So the fact that they were different from the beginning and that they were siloed didn't really make sense. And now those barriers are coming down, right? It's all coming together because ultimately advertising is marketing. So what's happening more specifically is, if you think about the modern day marketer, right? You think about what a CMO cares about. A CMO cares about technology. A CMO cares about data. A CMO cares about kind of orchestrating the entire user experience. A CMO cares about their funnel, right? All of these things span marketing and advertising. And so what's starting to happen is the worlds are colliding, obviously. And if you're a salesperson in the space, or really anybody, if you're an operator, if you're a buyer of advertising technology or marketing technology or media, you need to be well-versed in these multiple kind of areas to be able to do your jobs effectively. And maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago, that wasn't necessarily the case because we were siloed, right? Marketing teams were siloed across adTech and MarTech. Agencies were siloed across MarTech and adTech. But again, those lines are all kind of blurring and coming together. So if you're, let's say, a buyer, right? Let's take a buyer for an example. And in the past, maybe you were just using a few DSPs to execute ad buys and maybe working with some publishers directly to execute ad buys. Well, now data is a big part of that equation. And in the past, maybe data wasn't really that important, but today it is. But because data is crucial now, where does the data come from, right? A lot of the data comes from marketing technology, comes from your cloud or your data lake or your CDP. So you have to orchestrate those things in order to be able to effectively execute advertising. So like all of these lines are obviously starting to blur and folks just have to be up to speed a lot more than they used to.
I'm going to piss you off a little. I apologize.
Go for it.
Advertising is part of marketing.
Mm-hmm.
AdTech is its own industry. I always thought AdTech should be considered part of MarTech because advertising is part of marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, what we're seeing is the blending, and you mentioned sort of I don't know what de-siloification is. We're breaking down the walls between these two data sources. AdTech was way ahead of MarTech earlier with real-time bidding and connecting all these disparate data sources to put the right ads and get the money from the right advertiser and show the right creative and yada, all this sort of multivariate stuff. AdTech was way ahead in the AOL, Yahoo, even sort of Facebook advertising campaigns. And then all of a sudden we saw this huge shift in MarTech where it wasn't just manual inputs from CDPs, but you get the Clearbits of the world enriching data in an automated fashion. And all of a sudden the MarTech tools started to catch up. So now I think that we're sort of on parallel, but fundamentally, I believe that the MarTech tool is now blending into AdTech. You call it MadTech. I still call it MarTech. It's all part of the technology behind marketing. Am I right or wrong?
No, I agree with you. You did not piss me off.
It's early. I'm not done yet.
I think MadTech's silly. We don't need to call it that. I said it in the beginning. I think AdTech is a subset of MarTech. It's all marketing at the end of the day. It's called the CMO, right? It's not called the CAO.
Well, shit, where do I go from here? So there's this convergence, and we agree that it's all part of marketing. Talk to me about who's doing this well, where they're blending data signals that they're getting from their MarTech tools, their CDPs, their CRMs, their first, third-party data, and feeding into advertising, probably programmatic campaigns, to effectively drive customer relationships.
Whether we like it or not, I think it starts with the big guys. I think it starts with the walled gardens. Amazon and Google have done a pretty good job saying, listen, we're going to span both sides of this. Google kind of started things off with Ads Data Hub, that being their clean room technology. Obviously they've invested a lot in GCP and they're trying to bring that stack together. I think Amazon's done a fantastic job building out Amazon Marketing Cloud, connecting it more to their ad tech offerings, their DSP, et cetera. And they're going to market and saying, listen, not only can you do all the ad tech stuff, but you can store your data, you can orchestrate, you can connect to other third parties too as needed, and you can bring it all together in one stack and do everything here. The flip side of that, the downside is, well, you're operating in a walled garden. You have to kind of do things and live in those walled gardens in Amazon's ecosystem and in Google's ecosystem. So what's interesting to think about is who is now kind of following in those footsteps a little bit and trying to pull all these technologies together in an interesting way. I do find, again, I'm an ad tech guy, so I can't necessarily speak this language that well. And that's why I run U of Digital. I learn a lot from U of Digital. We run a lot of training nowadays for the MarTech ecosystem as well. And we train people on MarTech. I sit in a lot of sessions and I'm constantly learning from our own stuff. But anyways, I think Snowflake's really interesting right now as kind of a hub that's connecting a lot of these technologies in a central place. It's very new for the ad tech ecosystem to hear a company like Snowflake constantly creating these connections, constantly in the news. Okay, well, Snowflake now has an integration with The Trade Desk, the leading DSP in the space. Snowflake now has an integration with Amazon's DSP and their ad tech stack. So I think Snowflake is a very interesting kind of hub where a lot of different players from both sides, MarTech and adTech, are connecting centrally and saying, okay, well, this is our connective tissue. The data warehouse can be our connective tissue. So I actually think like Snowflake is a very interesting facilitator of the convergence of the two in a way.
Two things. One, you mentioned the big walled gardens and advertising, and one of the first platforms I think of is Facebook. You didn't mention them. You mentioned Google, you mentioned Amazon. Is Facebook falling behind in their ability to take your customer data and use it to do effective advertising?
Facebook, from my perspective, is always, we talk about Google as the walled garden. Facebook, to me, is the ultimate walled garden. They don't really play nice in the open web at all. And everything's about advertising on their owned and operated properties for the most part, right? Aside from Facebook Audience Network. So what's interesting about Facebook is they've got some interesting tools and data sets. They don't really play nice at all with others, with third parties, with integrations and things like that, with measurement solutions. And really, it's all about driving the value of their owned and operated inventory up, right? And if you think about what a marketer cares about, it's, hey, we want to be able to play across a lot of different channels, a lot of different publishers and partners. Facebook doesn't enable that. Google and Amazon do. And what's interesting about Google and Amazon is they're saying, hey, take your data, marketer, and we're going to facilitate from a MarTech and an adTech perspective for you to use that data and activate against that data in our ecosystem, but also activate across the open web. And in that way, they're driving value up for their own products, obviously. Facebook doesn't facilitate that, right? They're saying, hey, give us your data and we're going to drive up value for our own stuff. So yeah, I would say the value prop that Facebook has in market for a CMO is very confined in that sense.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned tools like Snowflake that are building on top of the data warehouse. I'll also throw in there a new generation of CDPs, which are built on top of the data warehouse, the high touches of the world, which also do this potentially more efficiently. I think there's a new wave of technology that's coming to help us do a better job integrating things like MarTech and adTech. What are some of the things that you're most excited about as we continue along this convergence of both marketing and advertising technology?
Back to Snowflake, right? I think cloud is fascinating to me. This notion of cloud, again, almost as a facilitator or connective tissue between the two, I think is crucial. At the end of the day, there's so much technology now. You look at the Lumascape on one side, you look at the MarTech landscape, and there's thousands and thousands of companies. And I hear constantly from marketers that, hey, we've overinvested, we've overbought, we have too many tools, we don't know what to do with all these tools. I think that the emergence of cloud is kind of like a key piece of technology for a marketer and a place where you put your data, and then have other technologies sit on top of it will, first of all, liberate or basically help marketers tap the value from those technologies a lot better and a lot more efficiently. So they don't feel like, oh, okay, I bought all these things, I don't know what to do with them, I don't know how to elicit value from them. I also think on the flip side, it'll require them to have less technologies in place. There's a lot of technologies that exist to be able to port data back and forth between other technologies. I think of DMPs. DMPs were early in the ad tech space to be able to just kind of facilitate the movement of data and kind of the commingling of first party and third party data. And with the emergence of cloud, with the emergence of CDPs sitting on top of cloud solutions, with those all then connecting over to your activation platforms, like what is the use case anymore for that type of technology? Maybe it's not there anymore. That increases efficiency for marketers, that increases speed, that increases control, I think, transparency, all the things that I think modern day marketers are looking more and more for in their stacks.
Yeah, I do think that there is a potential technology winter coming here as the ad tech and MarTech landscapes converge, in the sense of people did overbuy. There's probably 5 ad tech tools when you need 3. And then all of a sudden they're going to be, as we get closer to the single source of truth, everybody starts building on top of their own data warehouse and the CDPs become richer and more effective. All of a sudden you're not going to need those other 3 MarTech tools as well. Maybe we're just going to go right from data warehouse into end advertising platform through something like High Touch or one of those compostable CDPs. The future is near, and hopefully that means good things for both the MarTech and the adTech industry, and we can all sing Kumbaya together. And that wraps up this episode of the MarTech Podcast. Thanks for listening to my conversation with Shiv Gupta, the founder and CEO of U of Digital. Join us again tomorrow when Shiv and I continue our conversation talking about how publishers can monetize their audience with alternatives to cookie tracking. If you can't wait until our next episode and you'd like to learn more about Shiv, you can find a link to his LinkedIn profile in our show notes. You can contact him on Twitter. His handle is airgoops23. That's AIRGUPS23. Or you can visit his company's website, which is uof.digital. That's uof.digital. Just one more link in our show notes I'd like to tell you about. If you didn't have a chance to take notes while you were listening to this podcast, head over to martechpod.com, where we have summaries of all of our episodes and contact information for our guests. You can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter, and you can even send us your topic suggestions or your marketing questions, which we'll answer live on our show. Of course, you can always reach out on social media. Our handle is MarTechPod, MarTechPod, on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, or you can reach me directly on LinkedIn. My handle is Ben J. Shap, BenJShap. And if you haven't subscribed yet and you want a daily stream of marketing and technology knowledge in your podcast feed, we're going to publish an episode every day this year. So hit the subscribe button in your podcast app, and we'll be back in your feed tomorrow morning. All right, that's it for today. But until next time, my advice is to just focus on keeping your customers happy.